They said the child was cursed, not because of her face or her silence, or because she wouldn't cry when she was born, but because of what the midwife discovered once she opened her tiny legs to wash her. Something was wrong, something impossible, something growing inside her. A newborn, pregnant. This wasn't some Appalachian folktale passed around in the hills. This was real, documented, suppressed, and whispered about. The kind of thing that only comes from generations of something that should have stopped long ago. A child born from incest so thick, so layered, that nature itself had stopped resisting. It happened in the late 1800s somewhere between the ridge lines of southern Tennessee and the foggy pines of western North Carolina. The records are brittle, half-burnt, and censored. But the story survived in medical journals buried in dusty archives and in family Bibles with pages torn out where her name should have been. The family had a name, but we won't start with it yet. You have to earn it. For now, all you need to know is that she wasn't the first, but she was the last. The culmination of a bloodline that had folded in on itself so many times it no longer resembled humanity in any predictable form. There was no birth certificate for her. No doctor would claim her. The man who delivered her wouldn't say a word for the rest of his life. It wasn't just what was found inside her. But who? DNA wouldn't be invented for another century, but something about that fetus. Something felt familiar to the midwife, not just in the medical sense. She said she saw eyes she recognized. Eyes that belonged to someone who should have never been born again. And this was only the beginning. Most people think inbreeding just leads to deformities, maybe intellectual disability. But they forget that when you trap DNA in a closed loop long enough, nature improvises. The line between child and mother, brother and father, it dissolves. And what's left behind is unrecognizable. A lineage not meant to continue. This girl, she was the product of that legacy, a secret that never left the valley until now. They called it the Blythe lineage, though that name never appeared in the census. The Blythes weren't drifters or immigrants. They were rooted, embedded in the mountains like rotten old timber. No one remembered when they arrived. No one remembered them ever leaving. By the time the girl was born, the Blythe family lived on 37 acres of dying land at the edge of Cad's Cove. What once might have been fertile ground had turned pale and acidic. Nothing took root. Nothing survived except them. One creaking house, 2 sheds, and a barn that hadn't seen livestock in years. Just silence and the sounds of children that didn't go to school. Children no one ever named aloud. In the valley towns nearby, folks whispered that the Blythes kept to their own. What they meant was they married their own. Brothers married sisters, fathers married daughters, cousins raised children with no knowledge of the world beyond the tree line. And generation after generation, the blood thickened, the minds dulled. But something else emerged, too. A kind of singular focus, an obsession with keeping the line pure, as if they believed they were preserving something divine. But when you lock blood behind the same walls long enough, it begins to turn on itself. The girl, the one born pregnant, was named Claraara, though the name never made it to paper. She was never baptized, never brought into town. She never left the house she was born in. The only record of her comes from a traveling nurse sent up the trail by a missionary group in 1891. She wrote a single line in her journal before abruptly quitting her post and vanishing from public service. Saw a child breathing, swollen, female, belly firm, moving. She was no more than 8 days old. Claraara's condition wasn't just medical. It was spiritual. The locals believed it a punishment, a sign, a reminder that the valley still remembered the sins of its oldest families. They said her eyes didn't move like a baby's. They stayed fixed, watching, knowing. The fetus inside her was removed. It survived only a few minutes, just long enough for the midwife to realize the shape of its jaw matched another child who had died 2 winters before. A child with the same last name. There was no grave, just an unmarked patch of dirt behind the shed. That date, July 26, 2025, was dismissed by most. A meaningless scribble, a coincidence. But archivists who reviewed the surviving file noticed something strange. Every significant Blythe family event had occurred on the same day. Claraara's birth, the doctor's disappearance, the raising of the house, even the mental patient's final vanishing act. All of it on July 26, decades apart, but always the same date. Some called it folklore. Others saw it as a design, a ritualistic tethering of events to a single point in time, as if that bloodline, fractured and silent as it was, still pulsed beneath the soil, still kept its own calendar. So, what happened today? A genealogist in Asheville received an envelope this morning with no return address. Inside was a lock of black hair, a small tooth, fresh, and a note. No words, just a name carved into the paper fibers so deep it tore through. Clara. At the same time, a rural mailman in Monroe County, Tennessee, filed a report about a house that shouldn't be there. On a road long abandoned through land that had been undeveloped for nearly a century, he saw smoke, then a rooftop, a porch swing, a little girl in the window. But when he returned with police, there was only brush and silence. No house, no footprints, no girl. Yet his body cam footage, later reviewed by state officials, shows something else entirely. Frame by frame, the house appears just faintly. And then, unmistakably, a pale child in the window holding a small doll, and in her other hand, the same tooth that had arrived by post hours earlier. The footage was leaked briefly online before vanishing without explanation. Those who saw it described something wrong with the girl's movement. She didn't turn her head. She pivoted her entire body slowly to face the camera. Her mouth never moved, but the audio crackled with static and a single phrase, "Repeat, Ted. Return to the names. Return to the names." People began searching through old family trees, through forgotten Bible pages, and in the margins of ledgers dating back 150 years. The name keeps appearing, Claraara Blythe. But here's what's worse. She isn't listed as a child. She's listed as the matriarch. A title reserved for the origin, not the result. The first, not the last. They had it backwards all along. Claraara wasn't the end of the Blythe bloodline. She was its beginning, a convergence point, not a mutation, a genesis. The girl born pregnant wasn't a medical anomaly. She was designed that way, created not by chance, but by intention. The names on the walls, not just the dead, not just relatives. They were a blueprint, a map of a bloodline that didn't run forward in time, but looped. Names repeating across generations not as errors but as rituals. Rebirth through incest, repetition, confinement. Every Blythe born with the same blood, the same eyes, the same purpose. The inbreeding wasn't degeneration. It was a formula, a closed circuit, forcing the same traits, the same consciousness to echo down through bodies like a haunting. Claraara wasn't their daughter. She was their mother, sister, child, origin. And every birth that followed was just another version of her, modified, diluted, reformed, but never gone. You think that kind of thing can't happen? That souls don't echo? Then explain this. A historian from Vanderbilt researching Appalachian religious cults found a journal from 1862. It belonged to a preacher who had passed through Cad's Cove delivering supplies during a bitter winter. He mentions a family that refused salvation, whose house reeked of sour milk and burnt hair. But it's the last line that makes your stomach turn. The girl opened the door herself. She was 7, green eyes, crooked smile. She called me by name. I hadn't told her. And she said, "I knew you when I buried you the first time." Claraara was already there, already 7 decades before she was born, which leads to the final horror. What if she's not tied to a house or a family or even a place? What if she's tied to the blood itself? What if every cousin marriage, every secret birth, every unrecorded child hidden in the hills of America carries a seed, a piece of her? What if Claraara is the price of containment, the cost of trying to keep bloodlines pure and histories buried? And what if she's not gone at all? What if on this day, July 26, 2025, you saw her in a child's eyes in your family tree in your own reflection? Are you sure you're the first to live your life? Or are you just the next one Claraara chose to remember? Claraara lived, if you can call it that, for just over 7 years. 7 years without ever setting foot outside. 7 years without schooling, sunlight, or recorded growth. It was as if time forgot her, just as the town had. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She didn't even seem to age, not in the normal way. Her limbs lengthened unevenly. Her skin remained waxy and pale. Her eyes, they never blinked long enough. The family rarely spoke of her. Even the other Blythe children, who should have seen her as a sibling, seemed to avoid her room. That room at the top of the narrow stairwell stayed locked most days, but not from the outside. Claraara locked it from within, and she always had the key. An outsider wouldn't believe this. A child locking her own door before she could speak. But that was the thing. Claraara understood things long before she should have. They say she never looked surprised, never showed confusion, and that's what terrified them most. Her silence didn't feel like a symptom. It felt like a decision. By 1898, rumors had reached the county. A state doctor came up to investigate reports of mysterious births and unregistered deaths. He found nothing officially, but in his private notes found years later stuffed between volumes at a Nashville library, he described something far worse than neglect. He wrote, "The child does not interact. The family refers to her as mother, not in jest, not in mockery. They believe it. The youngest refers to Claraara as the one who brings the names. I was offered stew made of mushrooms and God help me, I think something else." This is where the story splits in two. Some say the doctor was driven mad, returned to Nashville ranting about the girl born with ancestors inside her. Others say he never came down from the ridge, that his hat was found hanging from a branch 2 years later. Still clean, still dry, no trace of him beneath. And Claraara, she didn't die the way children do. There was no sickness, no injury. One morning, her mother, who was also likely her aunt and cousin, went up the stairs with a bowl of boiled oats. When she opened the door, Claraara was gone. No signs of struggle, no broken glass. The window was sealed, and yet the room smelled like soil, as if something had crawled back underground. Years passed. The Blythe home fell into decay, its walls crumbling like the bloodline that built them. Most of the family perished in obscurity, tuberculosis, frostbite, starvation. But no one claimed their land, and no one dared knock on their door while it still stood. By the time officials came to condemn the property in the 1930s, it was already too late. The Blythe name had all but vanished. The land was silent. And in the upstairs room, they found something that didn't belong. The walls were covered in names, hundreds of them, scratched into the plaster with fingernails, bones, or whatever could cut shallow but sharp. Some were traditional: Anna, William, Joseph. Others were biblical: Obadiah, Methuselah. But then the names began to twist. Repeated syllables, patterns that didn't look like names at all, but codes, glyphs, words that had never been spoken out loud, all written by a child who had supposedly disappeared 30 years earlier. And in the center of the floor was a circle made of dried leaves, bird bones, and pieces of cloth laid with exacting symmetry. At the center of that circle, a child's tooth, not fossilized, still fresh, and too small for any normal 7-year-old. The county filed it all away as delirium remnants. Blamed it on isolation, mold exposure, hysteria. The house was torn down, the land salted, but strange reports kept surfacing. Hikers who passed too close to the site would fall ill. Dogs refused to walk past the southern fence line. And one geologist surveying the soil for potential development collapsed suddenly, eyes wide open, muttering a name that didn't appear on any local record: Claraara. But she never fully disappeared. In 1974, a nurse at a Knoxville mental institution reported a new patient. She didn't speak. Her birth records were blank. She had long matted black hair and cloudy green eyes. She was estimated to be in her late 20s, but her teeth were baby teeth, all of them. The woman would draw for hours circles, faces, names the staff didn't recognize until a janitor from the Appalachian saw one scrawled on the corner of a napkin. He froze, dropped his mop. "That's my great-uncle's name," he whispered. "He died in 1883. They checked. He was right. And no one ever told that patient his name. If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments. What would you have done if this was your bloodline? The institution kept her for 11 years. She never spoke, but she listened and she never aged. Her chart listed her as 28 when admitted and still 28 when released. Skin unwrinkled, eyes unchanged. The staff rotated, directors retired, but she remained untouched. She was known simply as Patient C. No family ever came for her. No one visited, but every few months she would scribble another set of names. A pattern began to form. The names correlated to birth and death records from small mountain towns. People long dead, some still alive. One nurse made the mistake of searching her own family tree. She found a match. Her own grandfather, a man who had died before she was born, was scrolled onto the corner of one of CS paper trays, misspelled slightly, but exact in date, exact in burial location. After that, the staff began refusing to work her ward. The final straw came in 1985. A young doctor assigned to monitor her noted that she had drawn a figure repeatedly, not a name, a face, over and over with terrifying detail. A man in a wool coat with eyes like boiled milk and a split lip. She filled 12 pages with his face in one day. The doctor thought nothing of it until 2 months later that same man walked into the ER with frostbite and no memory of where he'd been. He'd gone missing 4 years prior, last seen hiking near the Smokies. He had no idea who Patient C was. But when she saw him through the hallway glass, her body convulsed, not in fear, in recognition. That night, the cameras in her ward went dark for exactly 3 minutes. When they came back on, she was gone. No broken windows, no unlocked doors, just an empty bed, and a single word written in red on the wall above the pillow. Return. The tape was confiscated, the hallway locked off, the institution went silent, and from that moment on, any inquiry into Patient C was met with legal silence, her record sealed, her drawings destroyed, or so they thought, because they missed one. A paper tucked behind a radiator, faded by heat and dust. On it, a final message. Not a name, not a face, but a date. July 26, 2025.